The beautiful state of Wyoming, with a total population of the whole state less than that of Denver, Colorado, and almost half of the state owned by the federal government. Ride along with us for the next 2,400 miles as we explore every corner of this great state.
We don't need a destination, let's go where the river's taking us.
We started this 22-day overlanding trip just outside of Rock Springs. That's where we would climb up onto the mesa and meet up with the rest of our friends. We were all very excited to get this trip started and couldn't wait to meet up on the mesa. There's going to be a total of 6 rigs to begin this adventure, and I'll introduce them a little later in the video. This rendezvous spot was supposed to be the first campsite so everybody could just relax a little bit after a long day's drive. However, the Wyoming winds had different plans. It was way too windy up there to stay the night, so we all decided to look for a little better cover. Once we made it off the bluff, it wasn't long at all before we found some of the famous two-track that Wyoming is known for. It also wasn't long before we found our first obstacle.
Well, Deb just near lost her off-road flip-flop.
Well, it wasn't anything too difficult. This was our first trip with a trailer, and there was another trailer with us. Another thing that we were unsure about is how this terrain reacted, how it reacted to water, and just how deep and soupy these mud holes could be. It ended up being no issue at all, but this is a good time for me to start introducing the crew that's with us. In the white 392 with the hiker trailer, you have Teddy and JoJo from Cook Tire. Next, you have a couple familiar faces on the channel. You have Joe and Josh from The Day We Make, other known as Feral Joe. Next, you have Misty and Maddie from The Day We Make and Lady Overlander Radio, and they're going to be in the only Toyota in the group for the month. And then you have Jimmy and Kristen from Frenchy Overland. And bringing up the tail and making sure nobody gets left behind is Matt and Dawn in their gray Wrangler. After a little bit of two-track, we got back on a little better road, made a run across the desert for some hills. The plan was to find some cover. And that we did. We found a little low-lying area behind some small hills, which made for a perfect campsite for the night and our first incredible sunset. The rest of the evening was spent catching up around the fire, telling a few stories, and getting ready for the rest of the trip.
When I got ready, I put my boots on, and then she said, okay, it's time.
The next morning, there wasn't a whole lot of time spent around camp. Everybody packed up pretty quick as we were all excited to see what Wyoming had to offer us. From camp, we would leave there and head northeast. The general direction was towards the Honeycomb Buttes area. In just a few miles, we made our first stop. It was at the White Mountain Petroglyphs, and this was definitely one of those places that we had to stop and spend a little bit of time checking out. This site is culturally important to 4 Native American tribes and is said to have petroglyphs dating back over 200 years. In addition to the petroglyphs, it was obvious that this had been a stopover for centuries by the amount of black soot along this small cave. was also really cool to see the different layers of rock. Here you can see a layer that is mostly sand and what looks like washed pebbles. It's hard to believe this vast valley was once completely underwater. As soon as we left there, we were looking for more of that historic 2-track, and we found it. It looked like these washouts were going to be kind of a theme across these open plains. This one seemed to be a little bit deeper than the other one, but at least it was dry.
Good. You're good.
Say they're all hitting rock bottom.
The next site that we wanted to drive by has been a navigational beacon in this area for hundreds or thousands of years, and that is the Boar's Tusk. This structure that jets up over 400 feet out of the valley floor is remnants of a dormant volcano from over 2.5 million years ago. Making our way on north and east, we then had Steamboat Mountain in our sights. Our planned route had us going just along the bottom of the mountain, but just like everything else, it's just a general route. I seen an opportunity to climb the mountain and get up on top, and that's exactly what we did.
This is what it feels like.
We are at 7,800 feet.
Well, I feel like we've got to stop here and just take it in for a few minutes.
Definitely.
We were all very glad that we made the detour because this ended up taking us to one of the most majestic overlooks of the whole trip. The view was so incredible from up here, we decided to stay up on top, but still head in the general direction that we had originally planned. This alternate route also brought us by another historic site, the Tri-Territory Historic Site. This monument was erected in the 1950s to mark the location of the Oregon Territory, the Mexico Territory, and Louisiana Purchase, and this is where they all three came together. There are 3 flagpoles that represent each one of those territories, and a 4th flagpole to represent the United States. One of the things that we were most excited about this trip was the ability to see wildlife. And one of the first things that we got to see were these incredible wild horses. It was truly a treat. As we continued to climb in elevation, the views kept getting better and better, and we knew that this was only just a taste of what we were going to get to see over the next 3 to 4 weeks. Before we knew it, we had made enough elevation climb to start seeing the remnants of last winter's snow. We were also seeing more remnants of the runoff from last winter's snow, and this one was a little bit deep. I decided to go first. We had tested the ground and made sure that it was just really soft sand, but I also knew that this trailer was going to have to push a little bit of dirt. Had it been any other typical trailer, I may not have done this, but knowing just how well the Expedition trailers are built, I was very cautious, but I also knew that by being cautious and easing through, this trailer could take what I was getting ready to put it through.
Wait a minute, it's in.
After just a little bit of grade work, we were able to make our way right on through the ravine.
Easy.
Next, Teddy was up, and he didn't have to do near as much grade work as I did, but he still dragged just a little bit.
Oh, that's digging in.
By the time Matt and Dawn had made it through, we had wore it down pretty evenly, and it was just a piece of cake from there. After that big ravine, we continued meandering our way towards the Honeycomb Buttes.
That's amazing.
As we got closer and closer to the Honeycomb Buttes, we knew that their colors were going to be amazing, but it looked like something that belonged in Utah instead of Wyoming. This area was so cool that we all had to stop and take a few pictures. We continued making our way on through the buttes, marveling at all the different colors. Keeping a check on the trailer was pretty easy using the rear camera. As we made it out of the buttes, we turned our sights a little more northwest, generally following part of the Oregon Trail. And it was here that the picturesque Wind River Range started coming into view. There were all kinds of pronghorn sheep along this area, and it was obviously birthing time. We found this little guy who didn't look like, but he was about hours old. We left him where he was at because we knew that his mama would be right back for him, and didn't touch him at all. It was getting later in the day, and we were paralleling Lander Creek, just at the foothills of the mountains. We decided this would be a perfect place to start looking for somewhere to set down for the night. After a little bit of scout work, Dawn and Matt found the perfect place to call camp for the night. As we made the turn to the location of where they had found camp, we knew it was going to be magical.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, the view.
This is perfect.
This was the perfect view and the perfect campsite. The Wind River Range in the background and a beautiful stream running by. It didn't take long at all for everybody to set up camp. We had definitely gained some elevation throughout the day, and it wasn't desert heat anymore. It was actually a little bit chilly and was a perfect night to fix up a campfire. This was also the perfect place and opportunity to set up the Julka for a nice hot shower along the stream. After delicious meals, hot showers, and a beautiful sunset, we all sat around the campfire and talked about the day's events. It wasn't long before everybody was tired and ready to call it a day. Hey, hon. What's Coddiwomple mean? You can get your new t-shirt at shopoverlandapparel.com. Only being a few days into the trip, some of us still hadn't got everything all sorted out.
Lord.
Still trying to figure out how to put everything away.
Yeah, it's a puzzle.
Even with all the commotion at camp, the pronghorn still just kind of cruised by. After camp was packed up, it was time to make our way on down the Lander Cutoff along the Wind River Range. As we made our way off the Lander Cutoff into the barge, we were quickly reminded of the seats that we had were a whole lot more comfortable than they would have had years ago. Speaking of history, just south of LaBarge is a location named Names Hill. This historic site along the Lander Cutoff is where over 13,000 immigrants passed by, many of them leaving their name. One of the more notable is James Bridger.
No, I tagged it on Facebook.
1911, the historians following Lewis and Clark's earlier...
One of the ways that we learned a lot about the history of this area was an app called Audio, A-U-T-I-O. This app gives you a history while you're passing along different points of interest throughout the United States. After hopping off the Lander Cutoff, it was time to set our sights a little more northward. It was time to make our way into the Bridger-Teton National Forest.
all the way up to the side of this bank here. That's how thick it was. And you still got to take the bypass.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you can see it was almost to the top of that.
Joe and Misty had been in the same location a couple weeks ago, and he was telling us how much snow had melted within the 2 weeks. Just before we had made it to the Tri-Basin Divide, we found a perfect camp spot to call home for the night. Today was kind of rare for us. We had actually found camp a little early for the day. That gave us plenty of time to hang out around camp, cook dinner, and we even took a walk.
Taco night.
Taco night. Spaghetti night. Being in the mountains, one of the things we had to be a little more aware of was our surroundings as far as wildlife goes. We were deep into bear country, and it was time to start hanging our trash. We could hear water running and falling in the distance, so we decided to take a walk in search of a waterfall.
Blueberries and blackberries and shit everywhere. All of us. That's when we just doubled back. After that bypass, you want the buyer's truck? Oh. That's gone now. Yeah.
Our walk brought us back up to where the snow had covered the road. It was time to let Aspen play a little bit. As the clouds started to look a little more threatening, we decided to make our way back to camp before we all got caught in the rain.
This is it. This is it.
As we broke camp and continued on the trail this morning, the plan was to make our way on north along the Grays River Road.
As you cross over the Tri-Basin Divide where the Gray River starts, you're reminded by this sign right here, to watch me grow. You can watch this river grow from a small stream here. When you get to Alpine, it's actually a very large river. After you come through the divide, you find yourself in Poison Meadows. This is a beautiful area, and I could see a lot of wildlife being here. While we kept a sharp eye and really looked for anything moving, we didn't see any kind of wildlife whatsoever through this part. As we continued our way down the river, I noticed a trail that paralleled this one. I checked the MVUM map, and seeing that it had just opened, we decided to give it a shot. This trail gave us some beautiful views of the mountains to the east, but it also gave us our first obstacle of the day. In no time at all, everybody was hard at it and clearing the trail. In just a few short minutes, we were moving again. This was a beautiful trail, and we just knew that at around any turn, we was going to see a moose or a herd of elk or a bear or something. We just kept looking. The only thing we were finding so far was down trees though. We were quickly on the move again, and another thing that we started to find was remnants of last year's winter. Are you starting to see a theme to this trail yet? Even Aspen was getting tired of the trees. Really making a joke about being tired of the trees. It was fun to be able to work with everybody, to formulate plans, and get through different obstacles. As we continued making our way along the trail, we started gaining some more elevation and getting to the point where we're starting to see some aspen trees. Things were getting really pretty at this point. At this point, we were at another tree. We had figured there was probably going to be more trees on down the trail. We had 2 saws and a limited number of batteries, so we decided to ration the battery from what we could and just drive over this part of this tree. At least Deb had a pretty view to look at. but we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with our next obstacle. This one took a little more planning and a lot more tools, but we were able to put something together and make it work. This tree was a little bit bigger than either one of our electric saws really wanted to handle, so we had to get a little bit creative and use the winch in conjunction with the saws. We used a tree saver to make it change of direction so we could get a better pull on the tree and pull it further off the road instead of just pulling it down the road. This angle also gave us a better leverage when it came to pulling the tree apart.
It's pulling that tree.
In no time at all, we had this big tree cleared and moved out of the way, all of the brush cleared up, and we were on our way again. Hear that whine? That's not the sound of nature. That's the sound of a DeWalt. Yep, the skies were looking dark, and we didn't know how much further we were going to have to cut to get our way out of there. Quick inspection of the map showed we had about another mile to go. It did look like just past the half-mile point, it would widen up some for us. But the first half mile of that part is not going to widen up for us at all. As a matter of fact, it was the tightest part of the whole trail. As we made it through this switch back here, we were greeted to a beautiful field with snow-capped mountains overlooking it. As beautiful as the field was, it closed up on us one last time before we could get out to the main drainage.
Interesting.
Pretty. At this point, we have made it back to Gray River Road. We made our way down the road, noticing that it was wider, but also that the river was getting wider too. Remember the sign we had talked about just earlier? The river is definitely getting wider and growing pretty rapidly. This time, it was getting close to lunch. This was one of the spots that I had marked on the map for a campsite, so we decided it would be a perfect place to grab something to eat. One of the things we really liked was the time of year that we got here. It was late June and all of the flowers were blooming. After a good lunch and spending some time stretching our legs, it was time to get back on the trail and head on down the river. We were lucky to get through lunch rain-free, but it did finally catch us before we got out. Luckily, it wasn't anything major and was just enough to knock the dust down. Once we got to Alpine, we refueled, resupplied, started looking for a place to camp. We looked at camping right along the lake here, but everything that was suitable for us just was full. It was a pretty popular weekend there, so we decided to make our way on up the Snake River and find something a little closer to the Teton National Park. As we got closer to Jackson, you could see little glimpses of the Tetons coming into view. We made our way through a very bustling Jackson the weekend before 4th of July. The plan was to go through the elk preserve and try to find us a campsite on the mountain overlooking the Tetons for the night. The Tetons were definitely something to see off in the distance, especially with the sunlight the way it was. But we were hoping to gain some elevation and get a better view of them. We never did see any wildlife through the preserve or up this mountain here, but Aspen sure smelled something because he was bouncing from side to side trying to figure out what it was. We continued making our way up the mountain as the sun continued to fall behind the Tetons. We made our way to camp after dark, but this time it was way too late to fix a big meal. Sometimes you just get to camp late and you gotta eat what you got. Jeez. Quick meal, but the expedition definitely makes it easier. This morning we would be losing Misty and Maddie from the group as they were going to make their way on over to Oregon to Expo Pacific Northwest. This isn't the last time you'll see that Toyota on this trip though, as they're going to be making their way back to us when Expo is over. After having a breakfast and enjoying the view, it was time to pack up and get a little bit closer look of the Tetons. One of the difficulties that we found while traveling through Wyoming was access to potable water. Luckily, we had a guzzle H2O with us, and we were able to stop anywhere that we found a stream and be able to take water through this double filter and put it right into the tank. A lot of times during our travel, we do just get water from the gas station or something like that. But what we found here in Wyoming was the one gas stations that would let you get access to water, they either had faucets that didn't work or were missing a handle, and the ones that did have a handle or an operating water outlet wouldn't let you use it. We did check a few RV parks, and they were wanting more than $30 to fill up a tank. Having the guzzle H2O on board sure made things a lot easier when it come to finding water. We're going to be doing a full review on this soon. After filling our tanks up with water, we made our way on down the mountain and back through the elk preserve. I'm not sure we could have picked a better route to drive this morning, as the sun coming off of the Tetons was amazing. We made our way right on through Jackson. We stopped and checked out a couple stores, and then just outside of town, we stopped for an amazing lunch. As we walked into the diner, we all had our eye on this early model Bronco. It's one of my favorites. This little diner was in the town of Wilson, and they really fixed some incredible food. We spent some time exploring around the national park, but of course we can't show you that due to current regulations. So after that, we made our way a little farther east into the Wind River Range. We crossed the Continental Divide at the headwaters of the Wind River and had to stop and take a picture. We weren't on blacktop very long at all before we were back on Forest Service roads and looking for a camp, and we found a really great one for the night. Good morning, Joe. You finishing your morning, Joe?
I'm good to go.
After a perfect night's sleep near the headwaters of the Wind River, it was time to make our way on into the Wind River Range and explore a little bit of the Green River Lakes area. At this point, we have made our way out of the Teton National Forest and into the Shoshone. Today we were going to make it across Union Pass and head towards Green River. As we made our way above 9,000 feet, we crossed over Union Pass. Up here is beautiful meadows that still had snow on it from last winter, and was one of the prettiest places that we had seen so far on the trip. One of the coolest places that we found along Union Pass was the Strawberry Safety Shelter. This is a public-private project between the state of Wyoming, the National Forest Service, and several trail clubs throughout the area. It's a safe haven for people who explore this area who either get hurt or happen to get stuck in inclement weather. This shelter has a little bit of everything. It's got a wood-burning stove, complete with wood on the inside and extra wood on the outside. It has picnic tables in here so you can get in out of the weather while you eat your lunch or dinner, and it also has a first aid box. Having a search and rescue background, we were really impressed with this B307 Aware. It gives you the frequency and privacy code to be able to reach out in the event of an emergency. As we continued to hang around here and explore the Strawberry Shelter, we decided this was the perfect place to have lunch for the day. After lunch, we continued heading south through the flower-covered meadows, making our way on down toward the Green River.
Look at all that stank down there. You don't have to tell me.
At this point, we have made it down to the Green River Lakes area and decided to continue on south for dinner.
we had heard about this really cool place in Pinedale, and the name of it was the Pitchfork Fondue. The Pitchfork Fondue is only open 3 days a week through the summer and is only open for 3 hours, 5 through 8. So we were pretty lucky to be able to get here right in time. It's pretty unique in the fact that everything is cooked on a pitchfork and it's cooked in big vats of oil that you see behind.
Steak, chicken, trout, or we're doing grilled veggie fruit.
Not only is all your meat deep fried, they also make homemade chips. The meal also comes complete with fruits, salads, and your choice of drink. It's pretty entertaining to be able to watch them cook your food in this vat of oil on a pitchfork. What's also entertaining is to be able to hang out with your friends here, play some cornhole, and occasionally listen to some music. They encourage you to stay as long as you want.
It's not spicy. That sausage is awesome. Me and my boy, and we couldn't find it. So then I went.
As you sit around the table, they will bring the steak right to you off the fork. And if you want a little something extra on your steak, you can have grilled onions.
Get him served.
One of the things the girls got a real big kick out of was the amount of ground squirrels that were in this area. After an outstanding meal, we headed back out of town in search for camp. In addition to looking for camp, we were also watching the weather. It seemed that there was a pretty substantial storm starting to kick up and head our way. So we made our way further out of town. The clouds continued to get darker and darker overhead. We ended up finding a camp off of a BLM road along the Green River.
Get on trail, meet up with some friends that we recognize. Let's go.
When we got to camp, the rain had fully set in for a little while, so we decided just to hang out in the truck and kind of wait it out. When the rain decided to clear, the Wyoming sky decided to light up. Everything was still pretty wet and damp, and everybody had already had a full meal for the evening. So we decided just to hang out in the Voyager and get some work done on the computer. With a lot of thought and consideration, Deb and I have decided to start a Patreon. We have been getting overwhelmed with people requesting our tracks. Our trips are not something that's just simply thrown together. There's a lot of time and planning that goes into them. If you would like to support us and see our tracks, this is certainly a way to do it. The next morning we headed north along the Green River. The plan was to continue to explore some more of the Wind River Range. Today we were going to be fortunate enough to find some four-wheel drive only accessible routes rather than just some gravel roads.
You'd split this, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then go that way or this way?
That's a
That's sticking up out of the water there, Joe.
Okay, so you're gonna try to run that little
Trees on went to the
ridge
left.
Yeah, we'll try to run this ridge right here.
there? Okay.
Man, we have hit a hell of a mud bog.
People are going around it. gonna go through that.
Gotcha. Pick it up, Jimmy.
I ain't getting in that.
No, we'd sink up.
What was sticking up? I don't see.
As we made our way across the prairie here, we were running into one mud bog after another. Some of them were a little more challenging than others, but we all worked together to make our way through them fairly unscathed. As I was making it through this section, I looked in the rearview mirror to check on everybody else, and this is what I seen. Yep, that's Joe, nose down in a ditch.
Can't move. Hold on, I'll winch you back.
Joe had slid off into this deep rut and had high centered on both the front and rear axle. So Matt decided the best course of action was to pull him back and get him centered up with the winch. While it may look wide enough on the driver's side there to go around it, it actually wasn't. And even if you did, you had to cross over 2 big ruts to be able to get back where you needed to be. After that little clear up, it was on to our next one. As we made it out of that mud bog and closer into the aspen trees, we were making our way up in elevation and was pretty sure that the end of the mud bogs were over. We had made it through that section of aspens. Things leveled out a little bit, and we had found ourselves in another little bit of a bog with some deep ruts. The mud was a little bit deeper in that rut than what I initially thought. You ain't going nowhere.
You need a spot? Jamie, I'm coming back a little bit.
Yeah, probably. I'm sitting about 24 degrees right now.
You need me to back up, Jimmy? You coming back any farther, Teddy?
You're good right there.
No, Aspen, stay. Stay.
You don't want to get off in that right hole. It's deep. This right here is why it's good to have a good spotter. I couldn't tell from the inside really which way I needed to go, but after Teddy looked at it on the outside, he decided that I needed to go driver to get back over top of that deep hole rather than trying to go around it on the left side.
We can give her a shot.
After I went to the right, everybody else pretty much went to the left, and they made it with a relative ease. The only one that didn't follow suit by going left was Matt, and he couldn't be outdone by somebody with a trailer. He had to go right. After we made our way through that last big bog, it was onward and upward across the prairie with the Green River Basin in our rearview mirror. We still had a little bit of water to cross, but it was mostly rock bottom up here at the higher elevation. At about 8,500 feet, we hit a fairly steep section, but it was a lot of fun. The big boulders sticking out were not too difficult, but you definitely had to pick your line. At about 9,000 feet, things flattened out. There was a lot of marshlands and pine trees in this area.
Wyoming mosquito breeding facilities specialize in nurturing young larvae to adult mosquitoes. In the last census, there was 10 billion mosquitoes in Wyoming.
Did he just make up?
Miscounted because we've got that many today.
We made our way across the flats on top and began our descent down toward Du Bois. This was a perfect kind of trail to kind of end the day on, and we were already starting to look for camp. Just off to the left, about halfway down the mountain, I spotted what looked like a perfect campsite along the creek. We pulled into the site, immediately set things up, and started dinner. We were all hungry and ready to just relax for the rest of the evening.
Go low, Rip. Go low. Take him at the knees.
Oh, he's on it.
Being by the creek also gave us a perfect opportunity to set the Julka up again for a shower for everybody. We finished the evening off with a great campfire. This morning, everybody was feeling a little bit lazy. We knew we were close to town and decided to just roll in there and find some breakfast.
Yeah, I fell asleep right after you got in and I didn't.
We made it in to the historic town of Du Bois, where we found a cowboy cafe to grab some really good breakfast.
Kristen's gonna have to leave me too. She's real needy. What would you like?
After having a delicious breakfast, we couldn't help ourselves but to walk around town a little bit and just explore some of the history. Places like the Rustic Pine Tavern that had been here for well over 100 years. If only the walls and the mounts in this place could talk.
It's been here 104 years.
Other places that we need to check out was Welty's General Store, which was also built around the early 1900s.
Well, it's even weird.
We also took the opportunity after breakfast to fix a couple loose bolts on Feral Joe's Jeep. After that, Jimmy and Kristen decided to make their way on towards South Dakota before heading back home. After that, it was time for everybody to fuel up and get away from the city life again. Just outside of Du Bois, we headed north. The plan for today was to skirt around the Absaroka Range, making our way towards Cody. This was turning out to be an incredible ride through some amazing ranch land. We continued climbing in elevation until we made it across our first ridge, and that's where we got back into National Forest property. By this point, we were more out of the open plains and back into the pines. But it didn't take long to find the wide open valleys on this side of the ridge either. It was also along this road that we found the East Fork Guard Station. I couldn't imagine being posted here and just having this to look at every day and guarding the range. This setting really reminded me of Dances with Wolves. After checking out the guard station, we made our way further along the trail. It was here that we found a surprisingly deep river crossing.
You're good. Keep going. You're good. You're good. You're good. It's got a rock bottom here. I'm not going in.
I felt like I was going to go for a complete swim.
Not only did the music stop, this is where the trail stopped too. We had found ourselves entering the Wind River Indian Nation. A quick chat on the satellite phone revealed that we didn't have the proper permit to enter the property, so we decided to turn around and find another route. We checked out the map and figured out that we have to go by Blacktop to Shoshone and Thermopolis before we can make our way back to where we wanted to be. This new plan involved several miles of blacktop, so we aired the tires back up before we hit the road. As we were airing up, the wind started picking up, and it was time to also check the radar and the weather forecast in addition to the map. We stopped at a roadside rest before we got to Shoshone, and you could definitely see that the weather was going to change off in the distance. And before we knew it, severe thunderstorm warnings were starting to pop up all around us.
Is that where we're going?
Mostly girls.
Sweetwater, did you just get that?
Before election day or what?
Yeah, those are both south of us. We're getting ready to drive her smack into a substantial cell.
Yes, we are.
A lot of people ask what radar I use, and we use the Radar Scope app. It can also show you wind velocities as well. The deeper we drove into the storm, the harder the rain got, and then it turned into hell. Looking back at not being able to cross the reservation was actually a blessing, because this storm came right through where we would have been off-road on. By the time we made it to the Wind River Canyon, the storms had passed, and this was a beautiful, beautiful canyon. It was not on our radar at all, but it's definitely something we were happy that we got to see. Well, we may not be off-road, but this is still a pretty damn cool ride.
Damn sure is. Agreed. Very cool. It's neat to see that train track where they got that shored up there.
It's pretty cool.
We made our way through the canyon and then through Thermopolis, and then turned back west in search of petroglyphs.
This man's lost so much blood.
Looking off into the sky to the north and to the west, we could see the remnants of the storm passing on by us.
I'll wait till Gus gets back.
The clouds started to give way to a lowering sun as we made it to the Rock Legends petroglyph site.
About the woman in the tent nearby.
Here you can start to see some of the runoff from that crazy storm from the mountains. This roughly quarter-mile long piece of near vertical rock is home to over 300 petroglyphs that have been carved into the rock over the past several thousand years. Most of the rock art type here seen are what's called as Dinwoody tradition rock art, and it's some of the oldest in the world.
Yeah, I was telling builders.
Let me buy you and then we'll walk in.
As the sun began to fade behind the mountains, it was time to start looking for a campsite, and that's exactly what Aspen wanted to help me do. Actually, he was more interested in chasing the mud clods that hit the window than searching for a campsite. If he keeps this up, I'm just going to teach him how to drive. Yes, he is our 2-year-old, and just like most 2-year-olds, when he gets mad, he throws a tantrum. As the sun hid behind the Wind River Range, we found camp and set up and enjoyed the rest of the evening. With a lot of thought and consideration, Deb and I have decided to start a Patreon. We have been getting overwhelmed with people requesting our tracks. Our trips are not something that's just simply thrown together. There's a lot of time and planning that goes into them. If you would like to support us and see our tracks, this is certainly a way to do it. The next day, it was 4th of July. We had been on the road for quite a while and decided to just take a down day. So we hit Blacktop, made our way to Cody, Wyoming, caught up on some laundry, had a delicious meal, and even Aspen got to have a little treat. After having a down day and not videoing much at all in Cody on the 4th, the 5th, we took a step back in time and hit Old Town Cody, Wyoming. This was a very special place that took us back in time. We actually did a full video just on Old Town Cody, and you can find that in the description below here. I'll put it up to the right, or you can find it on our channel. After leaving Old Town Cody, we decided to find some more history in Wyoming, and that's when we set our sights west, and we were looking for the old ghost town of Kirwin, Wyoming. Our direction of travel for today will be southwest out of Meeteetse into the Absaroka Range. Our first stop in the Wood River Canyon was at the Double D Ranch. From the historic Double D Ranch, it was another 7 or 8 miles on up the canyon to where we would find the Kirwin ghost town. As we made our way past 9,200 feet in elevation, we came to the town of Kirwin. Around 1905, this town was bustling with over 200 people. The mines here were rich in gold and silver. This is another area that we did a complete video on that you can find the link to in the description below. We did a detailed walkthrough of all of the structures, including the Wolf mine shaft. After spending the whole day exploring the Wood River Canyon with the Double D Ranch and the ghost town of Kirwin, it was time to make our way back down the mountain and start looking for camp. Just outside of the little town of Meeteetse, we found the Lower Sunshine Reservoir, and this looked like the perfect place to set up camp for the night. We found a great spot on a point overlooking the lake, and this was the perfect place to just sit around, relax, and enjoy the weather, the scenery, and everybody's company. This was also the perfect place for Aspen to stretch his legs and get to chase the ball some, with the comfort of us knowing that he wasn't going to be able to go anywhere with his SpotOn GPS fence collar on him.
What was it called again? Earth what? Earth rover? Cruise? That's because the moon is full.
Don't think it had nothing to do with the moon. We kind of took our time around camp this morning and even got to watch a good old-fashioned cattle drive. Actually, it wasn't old-fashioned at all. They were using four-wheelers.
You guys must be turning a new leaf with this weather.
Man, I'm hoping so. I hope this kind of weather just follows us along. I've had enough of the rain. Joe was right. Things were really leaning our way as far as weather. We were just hoping that it held out for the rest of the trip. Our journey today would take us east. The plan was to go through the middle part of the state, through the Badlands of Wyoming, and eventually make our way somewhere near the Bighorn Mountains for the day. The Badlands of central Wyoming, between Cody and, let's say, Ten Sleeps, is an area that you don't hear a whole lot about, but it's just like being back in Utah. As we made across Fenton Pass, we had to stop and gaze at the beauty and vastness that lay before us. But little did we know, right off to the right was a whole herd of elk, and that was a lucky strike because we had been looking for them for the whole trip. As you leave Fenton Pass, the views are amazing on both sides of the road. You're literally riding right down the spine of the mountain.
Holding out the baby. None of the Indians moved. He went a few more steps and set the baby on the ground. Then he turned back and saw a gun.
As we continued our trek east, we had the Bobcat Draw Badlands to our right and the Red Butte Wilderness area to our left. We stopped and got fuel in Worland before continuing the rest of our day. Joe and Misty had a special surprise for us just outside of Ten Sleep that they really wanted to show us, and that was where we were headed to next. The place that they wanted to show us was named Castle Gardens. Now there are a couple different places in Wyoming that are called this, but this is the one that is just south of Ten Sleeps, and it's on BLM property. It was a very, very cool area, and you can actually camp here. Josh, Joe, and Matt decided to hike to the top of the gardens. I decided to get a little more of a bird's eye view. We spent some time checking out the gardens, and then it was time to continue our way on east with the sights of the Bighorn Mountains off in the distance. We made a couple stops here in Ten Sleeps before making our way onto US 16 along the Ten Sleep Creek, and this is where we would start really gaining some elevation, but the drive up through here is one that is absolutely incredible. In 13 miles, we gained just under 4,000 feet of elevation, and we were now firmly in the Bighorn Mountains. We had seen all the blacktop that we wanted to see for the day, and it was time to get into something that was a little less traveled. Now, these were open Forest Service roads, but you could tell they did not get a whole lot of traffic. As we know, the mountains often make their own weather, and it looked like this evening was going to be no different. Off in the distance, we could see the clouds darkening. We also knew that it would probably get pretty windy, so we wanted to get down a little bit lower in elevation and try to find some cover. So that was the plan from here. The further we went out, the less traveled this track got, but we made sure with Gaia in the MVUM layer that we were on the right track and that we were on a legal trail. So we continued searching for a good camp for the night. As we suspected, the storms were beginning to build, and it was now a race to find camp before the rain set in on us. We came upon a little bit better road in a saddle, and it had quite a bit of trees around it with some elevation on both sides of us. Right up into this little valley was the perfect place to set up camp for the night.
We ain't gonna feel much of anything back in here. This is good.
Yeah, I don't see anything moving.
Just as we got to camp, the rain started coming down, and that was one of the big advantages of having this Voyager trailer by Expedition. We just climbed in and waited for the sun to come out. The sun did eventually come out for a short period, and we were treated with a rainbow for the evening. The next morning, we were up and moving out of camp pretty quick, as we were all pretty excited to explore the Bighorn Mountains. We had a rancher stop by and ask us if we had ever been this way, and we told him we had not. He warned us that it got a little bit tight and there were some rocky sections down below. We told him that's exactly what we were looking for.
Go.
We were all having a great time coming down this rocky section, and here it got a little bit tight. I made it around no problem with the Gladiator, but the swing of the trailer proved to be a little more difficult. I didn't have any more room to swing out on the outside, so we were going to have to make something happen on the inside.
Wait a minute, you're climbing on the back.
I went ahead and climbed it up on the rock just to see what my tilt angle was and how much I was going to have to move around to get around the rock. At this point, I knew if I came on over the rock that I was going to end up doing some damage to the rear fender when I came off of the ledge. So it was time to get a little bit creative. I decided to climb back up on the rock ledge and use my Red Arc Tow Pro to lock the rear brakes and to slide off of the side.
Too high, Bill. A little bit more, a little bit more. It's gonna hit the fender. Oh. We owe Jeremy a rim.
We did just barely kiss the fender, and we also put a little rock rash on the wheel. Next was Joe and Matt. With the short wheelbase of the JLEUs, they made getting around this rock look easy. That was pretty much it for the rock ledges, but we did have another washout or two before we were able to cross the creek.
You're good. Easy. You're good. Go ahead.
It's the little things on the Expedition trailer, like cutting the edge off of that step to increase your departure angle, but still maintaining the step and the protection,
that really sets the Expedition apart from a lot of other trailers. We made it down to the creek, but what we hadn't realized yet was we still had an uphill, narrow section with a couple more shelves that we had to complete.
Good drop off over there.
And that's why I said that.
Nothing like leaning off the hill.
As we made it to the top of that hill, the terrain and the rock completely changed. It was like we had moved into a whole different part of the country. As beautiful as the view was from the trucks, we had to climb up on this rock formation to get a better view. From the top here, you could see all the way around for what seemed like forever.
Tons of people get to see Yellowstone and the Tetons, but not many get to see this view.
And that's what's so good about overlanding.
They can have it. I'd rather be out here.
Yeah, you can look 360 degrees around you, and
not
there's
run in that hole?
absolutely nobody.
Not a damn Walmart in sight.
Heck, you can't even get it on Amazon from here.
Not too far out of Hyattville, on the western slopes of the Bighorns, we made our way into the Medicine Lodge Canyon. In addition to this timeline that shows events leading back over 12,000 years, this wall is actually a timeline in itself because there is over 100 feet of petroglyphs throughout this wall. After taking a step way back in time, it was time for us to get back into the mountains. We headed east, back into the high country. And just like yesterday, the mountains decided to make their own afternoon weather. We were back up at 8,000 feet and in the aspens, and we knew that if it was going to rain hard, we were going to end up with hail again. But before we encountered hail from the sky, we encountered one hell of a trail.
Kind of hurt. Of what?
I don't know if I can stand 8 more days of this.
Speak for yourself.
I'll be so excited I'll have to say it on my hands. That's a 204 and was at 224.
We've gone through about everything today.
In a hailstorm at 8,700 feet.
This was 2 pretty good storms in as many days, and it had been just as many days since Joe had remarked about us having better weather. I think he jinxed us. At this point, we were beginning a fairly steep descent down into Woodchuck. The trail was starting to get pretty slick, so we had to be really careful here. By the time we had made it to Willett Creek, the rain had pretty much stopped and there was some sun starting to peek out behind the clouds. We made it across the creek without any problems. The sun popped out and we decided this was the perfect place to set up camp for the night. In addition to this being an absolutely, truly epic campsite, it also would give the trails a little bit of opportunity to dry out overnight, so hopefully they wouldn't be as slick or we wouldn't take more of a chance of tearing them up when we left in the morning.
You got the zoomies, that water's refreshing.
This was also a really good place for Aspen to spend some time out of the truck and stretch his legs some and run. The rest of the evening we caught up on downloading videos, Deb fixed another delicious meal, and we just hung around the fire and enjoyed each other's company. After a great night's sleep, we woke up to a sunny morning, sat around, had breakfast, and just really enjoyed the campsite. Before long, we started packing up and getting ready for another day's adventure. There were a few puddles holding a little bit of water, but for the most part, things had dried up from last night's rain. The trail was a lot of fun the last night, getting down to the creek here at Woodchuck Pass, and it looked like it was going to be just as fun or even better on the way back out. We were really enjoying the tight trails in this area, and the old split rail fence on the lower side was definitely a treat. As we continued our way along this trail, we noticed more and more rocks starting to poke out from the dirt, and it was only going to get bigger and only going to get better from here. This trail so far had been incredible, and up to this point we thought it was pretty much over. But then the trail had more to throw at us.
brush.
At one point, the word marooned slipped into his...
We'd made it to the top of the mountain and was making our way across the top of the meadows. Things were still a little bit wet from the snow here, but it wasn't really too bad. After that, things came to a very muddy halt. Well, going through this mud hole, the tire on the trailer had got stuck between two pretty big rocks. I couldn't go forward and I couldn't go backward. So it was time for the other Jeeps to try to get moved around us. They also had their share of problems too. At one point, we thought we were all stuck. Matt was able to make his way through, so we went ahead and hooked the winch line up to him to get me out of the mud. While we were concentrating on getting the Gladiator and the Expedition trailer unstuck, Joe was able to get his around without any further problems. Once we got freed up, it was on the trail again. When we got onto the main Forest Service road, we headed north, and the next stop was a splash dam interpretive site.
With a ground squirrel dangling from its tongue.
Yeah, it had to have been this morning because that side was in there and they come in from this side.
Halfway back, he...
Splash dams like these were used as part of the transportation system to get logs from out of the mountains down to the railroads. One of the other treats of the Bighorns is a better than average chance of seeing wildlife, such as this moose. By this point, we have made it to US 14, and it was time to make our way off the mountain to get some fuel and maybe a little bit of something to eat. At the bottom of this incredibly scenic drive was the little town of Dayton, and they had an awesome little old store there with great sandwiches. Just outside of Dayton is a little canyon called Tongue Canyon Road, and we thought this would be the perfect place to set up camp for the night. The problem with Tongue Canyon Road, though, was everybody else thought it was going to be a perfect place to camp too, and they all beat us to it. We made the decision to drive back up onto the mountain
and found a great place about a mile just north of US 14. This was also the perfect campsite to set up Aspen's SpotOn GPS fence.
Okay, we required GPS, so we're going to start our fence. And with this one, I'm going to walk it rather than just draw it out.
We did a whole video on how to set this fence up, and it works really good. They do have a couple bugs that they're working on, and that's kind of the stuff that we're doing with them, was we're testing it and making sure that it's going to work perfectly for the overlanding crowd. Once the fence was set up, Aspen was able to enjoy his surroundings, and we were able to relax too, knowing that he wasn't going to run off or be able to get away and get into any trouble. It was then time for Deb's homemade chili, a peanut butter sandwich, and relaxing by the fire. We woke up to another beautiful morning, and I had the opportunity to catch up on some video editing before we broke camp and headed south. We had checked the Forest Service website and specifically the MVUM maps, and what we were finding is they were shutting down a lot of the roads within the Bighorn because it was so wet. Part of camp last night was researching our map and our route and altering it a little bit. And we also knew that we were probably going to end up having to change it even more. Even with the detours, the reroutes, and alternative planning, we couldn't get over just how beautiful this area was. We hit it perfect for the flowers. Now this one also may be commonplace in Wyoming, but it's not for us. We don't just every day see a flock of sheep just wandering about the mountains. Aspen was pretty curious about them too. He really wanted to hop out and herd a few of them. We continued our climb and elevation throughout the Bighorn Mountains. Our next destination was going to be the Medicine Wheel. From the parking area, the sign says that it's a 1.5 mile walk and it's uphill both ways to the Medicine Wheel. Everybody was having a great day, and even Aspen were making friends.
Aspen's like, I'm scared, he's big.
While there are some uphill sections to this trail in both directions, it's still not terribly strenuous, and the views are absolutely breathtaking. This 250-year-old Medicine Wheel is located in northern Wyoming in the Bighorns. It is one of North America's most important and sacred landscapes to the Native Americans. After visiting the Medicine Wheel, it was time to explore some more of these high mountain prairies along the Bighorn Mountains.
Let's try it, right?
Yeah.
We'd stopped to take a break and realized that we had a leak on one of the trailer tires.
So we got a little bit of a leak in the sidewall. I think we pushed a rock in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the air out of the tire, not to take it off the bead, but to be able to force it back just a little bit to be able to get whatever debris is in there out of it, and then we'll just air it back up.
There it is.
After clearing the debris from the bead, we aired it back up and we're right back on the trail.
Like stupid.
As we continued making our way south through the Bighorns, it was getting later in the day and we started looking for camp.
Slow until
The problem was we were running into more and more road closures, and this one was actually on a main route. So we decided to turn around and head back north to try to find a camp.
And apparently they put even more out.
We continued our way north looking for camp, but all of the campsites that were kind of close to the blacktop were all taken, of course. So we ended up back at a familiar campsite, the one we had actually stayed at the night before. It was perfect, and we set up and did it all over again here. We had one more stop in the Bighorn Mountains before we continued our way on south. It was the Crazy Woman Canyon. Native Americans have lived in this area for thousands of years, long before any Europeans came along. There are numerous legends that surround this area, and Crazy Woman Canyon is no different. Although there are several different legends surrounding the Crazy Woman Canyon, the most notable is of the Morgan family. The legend goes like this. The Morgans were traveling up the canyon in a covered wagon, and that's when they were attacked by Sioux Indians, and the father was killed as well as 3 children. The legend is the mother went crazy after witnessing such a horrifying act to her family. She was then able to wrestle an axe away from her attackers and kill 4 of them before they left. She refused to leave her family and lived the rest of her life throughout the canyon. A man by the name of Jeremiah Johnson came along and found Miss Morgan beside her family who she had refused to leave. He helped to bury her family members, and he built her a small cabin, but later he found her frozen body, dead from starvation, along the same creek where her family had lost their lives. The second legend was about a trader who sold firewater or whiskey to the Native Americans. When they ran out, they returned for more, but he didn't have any more. The legend says that they killed him, but his wife escaped, and she wandered along the creek, eventually losing her mind. This legend also says that this lady was taken care of by a man with the last name of Johnson. The third one is totally different, but it tells the story of a young woman whose village was attacked, and she was subsequently killed. The Crow tribe believed that she could only be seen on moonlit nights in the creek, and they also thought that she brought them good luck. After making our way out of the bottom of the canyon, we continued to head south in search of more legends on our way to Medicine Bow. Next, we would find ourselves in the area where the Red Rock is and home of the famous Hole in the Wall. In the late 1800s, this area was very rich in outlaw history.
It was most notably used by Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch Gang and the Hole in the Wall Gang. We continued on south and found our way overlooking the Powder River, also known as the Outlaw Canyon. Outlaw Canyon is home to the Outlaw Cave, another one of Butch Cassidy's famous hideouts. Him, along with others such as Jesse James, used this area extensively to hide out in. Another fun fact is this is where the term "hold up" came from. They would come up here and find a hole to hold up in. It was actually spelled H-O-L-E-D. For camp that night, we found us the perfect flat spot overlooking the Outlaw Canyon. We all had to believe that we weren't the only ones that had ever stayed here. This is a perfect place to look for people coming to hunt you down.
Okay guys, as dirty as this is on the outside, I'm going to show you the inside. It is clean.
You know what, babe?
This is one of our favorite meals camping. It's easy, it's hearty, and it's just simply ham, green beans, and potatoes. It only takes one pot to do it all, and it's actually pretty easy to clean up. One of the other really nice things about this Expedition camper is not only the stove in the kitchen side, but the sink as well. You get hot running water that's pressurized, which makes cleaning up after meals a breeze. After dinner and cleanup, it was time to sit down, enjoy a fire, and enjoy our surroundings.
The next morning at camp, we found one of these cairns. We later found out that it's believed to have been put there by Indians thousands of years ago as a travel beacon. Speaking of travel beacons, it was time for us to continue our route south. Today, we will be traveling with one less Jeep. Matt and Dawn enjoyed this area so much, they decided to stay here for another full day.
Shaking his head about. A cypress stump served for a step up to the porch. More artful.
As we were making our way out of the canyon, we stopped to check out the information kiosk. We always try to do this when we see them setting out. They're always full of good information.
Moon's cuffed hand and chopped off 4 fingers which...
The day prior to this, we had run across some treatment on the road that was very sticky, and it was stuck all over the Jeeps and very thick. So we decided to hit a car wash and try to get some of it off. After getting that sticky stuff off the Jeeps, it was time to leave the blacktop again in search for more dirt. There are multiple states throughout the West that have their version of a horseshoe bend in a river. Wyoming is no different. Theirs is just a little bit harder to get to.
That window. Look at that window.
But when you do get there, the view is just as incredible as the trail that got you here.
You should just post this picture with as many vehicles you guys have fun and see how many people say horseshoe bend. Yeah. What year was it posted?
After admiring the beauty of the canyon just south of the Alcova Reservoir, it was time for us to continue our way south. We drove for a few more hours across the prairies and the back roads of southeastern Wyoming before starting to look for a place to set up camp for the night. We had made our way back to the North Platte River near the Shirley Mountains, and this looked like the perfect place to set up for the night. We found a really nice BLM established primitive campsite right along the river, and that was going to be home for us for the evening. It wasn't a rattlesnake at all. It was just a bird's nest that had fallen out from underneath the picnic table. Nevertheless, Aspen wanted to make sure that we knew it was there.
We have the jet boil here in this little cubby because the wind is blowing so hard. It's hard to cook on the outside burner, so we put this in here and it works perfect. And this is what we do in the morning to have coffee so we can cook on the burner.
And we're having pizza quesadillas tonight?
Yes.
We had some delicious pizza for dinner, and then it was time to take a walk and enjoy the surroundings of this part of Wyoming.
Go get him.
Come on, go get him.
Go get him. That's Josh. He's like, oh, my friend.
A couple things we definitely didn't expect to see in Wyoming were pelicans and seagulls. Apparently, they migrate here every summer. Another thing we found that apparently migrates to Wyoming in summer is the vast swarms of bugs. This was just about out of control. As the sun started to set for the evening, we set up the laptop on the picnic table and reviewed the latest episode of Coddiwomple before we put it out on YouTube. By this point, with the help of the thermocells, the bugs had settled down quite a bit, and we were able to enjoy the rest of the evening by the river.
That's crazy.
Oh, it's so dark you can't see them.
The next morning was just as beautiful as the night before when darkness took over. We were really looking forward to today. It was going to be the day that we finally make it into the Medicine Bow National Forest, but it was also going to be a day of reunions of sorts. Today was the day that Misty was going to be coming back from Expo Pacific Northwest, and also Matt and Don was going to reunite with us for another guy camping at the Medicine Bow. By the time it was time for lunch, we met up with Misty and decided to stop here in the little town of Elk Mountain, Wyoming. This town, with a population of a little over 150 people, has been a stopover for travelers since the late 1860s. The Elk Mountain Trading Post was established in 1895 and has been a place for people to refuel themselves and their supplies since that time. Another interesting fact about this town is it was also one of the original stopover places along the original Overland Trail. The trading company now is less of a supply store and more of a restaurant and a step back in time. But you still want to stop and get their delicious food. We left Elk Mountain with its namesake off to the distance to the west. Heading south into Medicine Bow, it was time to see what kind of trails we could find there.
Where did you see that?
It looks like more our speed than this one.
Yeah, I'm thinking so too.
I'm fresh out of Jeeps back here.
We got a rope.
Oh, shit.
Thanks.
Too bad you weren't with us when we got stuck, so you could have pulled us out. That would have been great.
I'm fairly certain you guys would have had to pull me out.
As much as we enjoyed the prairies of Wyoming, it was really good to get back into the mountains and the aspen trees. The aspen trees weren't as plentiful, though, as the pine trees in this part of the forest. We managed to get off the main Forest Service roads and get on to some of the tighter ones that got us a little deeper into the backcountry.
As we continued out this trail, it continued to get tighter and tighter. There was a lot of deadfall in this area, and we had to pay real close attention to make sure and not swing the Voyager into one of them.
So many places that you're just like, wow, this is spectacular. But Wyoming has had so many different things. I think that's why it's my favorite so far.
I agree.
I am glad you guys said to do Wyoming. That's why we done Wyoming.
Yeah, we're saving Montana for its own trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that's beautiful too.
The trailer was handling it like a champ though, and it was staying right in line with the truck, and we really didn't have any issues at all with it.
What do they say?
Well, this is typical for one of my shortcuts anyway. The good news is, if you look across the canyon there to that big wide open road, that's where we're going.
So close, but so far.
Even Aspen was trying to help trim some of the limbs back, but it just wasn't enough. We had to break out the chainsaw in a few places.
How about there?
We cleared through that section pretty easily and got back onto more main roads. Now it was time to find Matt and Dawn.
Matt, can you hear us yet?
We can hear you.
Okay, yeah, you're all coming in a lot clearer now too.
We met up with Matt and Dawn without any problems, and then it was time to start looking for camp. Misty and Joe had a favorite spot that they had camped at before here in the past, so that's where we went to for the night. And it was truly spectacular. This was also a really good location for Aspen to enjoy his SpotOn GPS collar. He spent the whole rest of the evening trying to make friends with the local ground squirrels.
That's a beautiful, and he's so focused. He is. That chipmunk, he hears you wrestling Theo.
Deb fixed another incredible dinner as we watched the sunset over Elk Mountain.
What you eating?
Vegetable soup. Because I was lazy and didn't get anything else out.
That's okay. It is. I do have lemon jelly for. Well, we don't have that many tortillas. I have. Oh, chili and stuff. Ravioli.
As the night came to a close, we all sat around and enjoyed watching some video clips from the adventures on this trip. The sheep worked pretty well for a screen, but we're looking forward to getting our real screen from Devos Outdoors soon. We spent quite a bit of time at camp this morning just being lazy before we got back on the trail. We hadn't done any pre-planning at all around Medicine Bow, so today we were just kind of wandering around to see what we could find.
So Mr. Burlingame knows it was different.
Look, Aspen. Hi, buddy.
One of the first things we found was this beautiful stream and decided it was the perfect place to top off our water. The Guzzle H2O really makes it handy to be able to get filtered water pretty much anywhere you can find a source. After filling up with water, it was time to see what else we could find. One of the things that we really noticed was if you wasn't on a wide open Forest Service road and got into these, there were a lot of pine trees that were down, and they were seemingly almost just cut wide enough for a side-by-side. The good side was occasionally you would pop out in these beautiful open prairies, and then occasionally you would find some old homesteads like this. It was really cool to walk around these old cabins and think about what it would have been like to live in this area over 100 years ago. After spending some time at the old cabin, it was time to continue moving on to see what else we could find. As it got later in the afternoon, we stumbled across this female moose and her calf. They were just kind of hiding in the edge of the trees. It was pretty cool to see.
It's in the tree line.
As we were intently watching these two, we looked over our shoulder and realized that this big bull was right behind us. We didn't stay too long because we were right between the two. We made it to camp a little bit later the night before and just really didn't shoot a whole lot of video. But this morning we got up, started fixing breakfast, and just really relaxing and enjoying camp this morning. Today was a day that we really weren't looking forward to. It was the day that Matt and Dawn was going to say their final goodbye and make their way on back to North Carolina. We really enjoyed having them with us on this trip. Since we got into camp late the night before, we didn't pay for our site. We were at a BLM campground, so we paid this morning before we left. This morning was spent making our way from the western side of the Medicine Bow National Forest eventually to the eastern side of the forest. And this was going to be because we were going to be meeting some special friends there to have another camp out before we made our way back home the next day. We'd seen quite a bit of wildlife throughout Wyoming, but we had not seen a lot of deer, and these were actually pretty big compared to some that we had back in Kentucky. Even on day 24 or 25 or whatever it was of this trip, we would still find monuments like this just out in the middle of nowhere. It was really neat to see the history. We made it back to Blacktop to get fuel and also to meet Artie and Stacy from Expedition Trailers. They had made the trip from Salt Lake City to eastern Wyoming just to be able to ride with us for a day and camp out for the evening. The area we decided to explore with them was the Laramie Ranger District of the Medicine Bow National Forest. We'd spent all afternoon exploring this area of the Medicine Bow National Forest, but now it was time to set up camp and enjoy each other's company and get to know our new friends a lot better.
No pressure.
No.
We're all following you.
Drawer that pulls out, and then I use a little jet foil. But we have a scuttle.
Shrimp krill on the menu tonight?
Yes.
For our last night in Wyoming, we had an incredible sunset, spectacular views, and even better conversation with our friends around camp.
It kind of fits.
The next morning we spent a lot of time around camp. We were really dreading the day because we knew this was the end of the trip and we were going to be heading back home. But we did take the time to sit down and do an interview along with Artie and Stacy. You can see that whole video on their YouTube channel, Expedition Trailers. After packing up camp, we were off to the land of hidden treasures. So we've spent the last 2 days of our 24-day trip here in Wyoming with the owners and creators of the Expedition Voyager trailer. And it's been a tremendous treat to have you guys here for the last 2 days. And I want to tell you how much I appreciate you guys taking the time and coming out and spending a little bit of time with us.
Yeah.
The trailer that you guys have created is unbelievable. And anybody that is even thinking about looking for a trailer, look up Expedition Voyagers. This thing is absolutely second to none. We have taken it all over the country in Wyoming, taken it across some of the most farthest out and more difficult trails that Wyoming had to offer, and it never balked the first time. Give them a look, expeditiontrailers.com.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Yeah, we really enjoyed this also.
We really enjoyed our time with Stacy and Artie, but the whole group that went with us is really what made this trip what it was. These are some of the best friends that a person could ever have, and they've made memories with us to last a lifetime.